When we think of global supremacy, we usually picture armies, borders, and missiles. But the most devastating weapon in the modern geopolitical arsenal doesn't fire explosives, it freezes assets. Imagine the ability to sever an entire nation from the international community with a keystroke. Without declaring war, a controlling power can lock a country's banks out of the system, causing foreign investments to collapse overnight and cross-border trade to grind to a total halt. The fuel powering this financial blockade is the United States dollar. It is the currency that prices the majority of the world's oil and sits in the vaults of almost every central bank on Earth. To move those dollars, nations rely on SWIFT. SWIFT is the global financial messaging network that executes international money transfers between banks. Because the vast majority of these cross-border payments clear in US dollars, they inevitably pass through American banking infrastructure. By controlling the primary medium of exchange and the digital plumbing required to move it, the United States holds the unilateral power to weaponize the global economy against its adversaries. This system was engineered in 1944 at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. While World War II had severely damaged the industrial capacities of Europe and Asia, the U.S. mainland remained untouched and held nearly 2/3 of the world's physical gold. The delegates gathered there had a specific goal. They needed to design an international financial structure that would prevent the competitive currency devaluations and severe economic depressions of the 1930s, which had helped fuel the global conflict. 44 nations agreed to peg their currencies to the US dollar. In return, the United States guaranteed the dollar was fixed to gold at $35 an ounce. To enforce this, they created the International Monetary Fund to monitor exchange rates and lend reserves to nations running trade deficits. Bretton Woods successfully rebuilt global trade, but it also structurally locked the US dollar into place as the indispensable gold-backed anchor of the capitalist world. By the late 1960s, that anchor began to drag. To fund the Vietnam War and extensive domestic social programs, the U.S. government printed massive amounts of currency, resulting in a severe global oversupply known as a dollar glut. With gold reserves rapidly draining as foreign nations demanded their bullion, President Richard Nixon acted in August 1971. He unilaterally suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold, detonating the central promise of the Bretton Woods Agreement. If the entire global system was built on the promise of gold, why didn't the dollar completely collapse when that backing disappeared? The answer is the petrodollar. The petrodollar refers to the system where global oil exports are priced and traded exclusively in United States dollars. Because every nation needs energy to survive, governments worldwide were forced to continuously accumulate dollar reserves just to buy oil. Furthermore, decades of international trade had already entrenched the currency. The world's banks, accounting ledgers, and sprawling international credit networks were fully hardwired to clear their transactions in US dollars. The dollar maintained its supremacy because it transitioned from being backed by a precious metal to being backed by sheer systemic inertia. The world economy was already locked inside the architecture. Today, because that massive global system still requires clearing through US infrastructure, Washington retains the unilateral power to enforce devastating financial sanctions. We are currently watching the consequences of this leverage play out. Following the invasion of Ukraine, Russia found hundreds of billions of its foreign reserves frozen and its major banks disconnected from the SWIFT network. This display of financial force has accelerated de-dollarization. De-dollarization is the deliberate process by which countries reduce their reliance on the US dollar for international trade and banking. Nations within the BRICS coalition are actively collaborating to bypass the dollar, exploring the integration of new shared digital currencies. Russia has already shifted a massive portion of its trade into non-dollar currencies. Simultaneously, China is building alternative international banking networks designed to clear cross-border payments entirely outside of U.S. jurisdiction. The system engineered at Bretton Woods to ensure global peace and stability ultimately birthed a mechanism of unmatched unilateral control. Now, the United States dollar faces its greatest existential threat, not from rival armies, but from rival financial networks.